Welcome back to The Outsider Edge. Today, we're continuing our journey through Dr. Revere's work on self-management. We're looking specifically at Chapter 5 from his book.
That's right. And if the earlier chapter sort of set the scene, explaining the why, Chapter 5, well, this is where Dr. Revere really gets into the nuts and bolts. It's all about the core building blocks, what he calls the master practices, and the linked primary attitudes.
Okay, so these are the essentials, the things you absolutely have to have.
Exactly. The source material positions them as the fundamental base, the foundation that any working self-managed system is built on. He argues they're always present in successful examples.
Got it. The must-haves. And the book links these up practices tied to attitudes.
Yep. 3 main master practices, and each one comes with a specific primary attitude that, well, you need for the practice to even function properly.
All right. Sounds crucial. So for this session of The Outsider Edge, we're going to unpack these foundational ideas straight from the source. What are they? Why are they so important? And how do they fit together?
And it's really important to keep in mind what the source stresses throughout. They're all interconnected. You can't just, pick one.
Yeah.
They don't work in isolation. You need the whole set. None of them alone is enough.
So no cherry picking allowed. But the source does say you could test the whole system maybe in one department or a small team, just not pieces of it.
That's the idea. You need the complete recipe, the whole ecosystem, even if you start testing it on a smaller scale first. You can't just test the flour without the eggs and expect to see if the cake works.
Makes sense. Okay, let's dive into the first one. Where does Dr. Revere start?
The first master practice is termed common knowledge. Or you could think of it as shared knowledge.
Common knowledge? How's that different from, a typical company structure?
Well, think about the traditional command and control model. As the source describes it, information and knowledge usually get bottled up at the top, right? Or in certain silos. A few key people have the data, they make the calls, and then tell everyone else what to do.
Yeah, information flows up, orders flow down, need-to-know basis.
Exactly. Self-management flips that completely. The source is quite emphatic here. For a self-managed system to function, for everyone to genuinely be able to make decisions and act with significant discretion, the only way is by making knowledge and information common property, distributed right through the organization.
So it's not just about having an open-door policy. It's about actively ensuring everyone has access to the critical information that maybe only executives had before.
Right.
Wow, that sounds like, well, it changes the power dynamic, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And the source leans into this. It says sharing knowledge, this deeply inevitably means sharing power, sharing authority, sharing influence. There's a fundamental shift.
Okay, sharing power.
Yeah.
That immediately brings up fear, right? For people used to being in control. Fear of mistakes, maybe fear of chaos. How do you deal with that?
And that leads directly to the first primary attitude. It's paired with common knowledge for exactly this reason. The attitude needed, according to Dr. Revere, is trust. Deep, foundational trust.
Trust as the counter to fear.
Precisely. The source presents trust as really the only effective antidote to that fear of letting go. If you want people to truly share knowledge, which means sharing power, you have to trust that they'll use it well, make sound judgments, act in the organization's best interest. Without that trust, the fear wins, you hold back information, and the whole self-management idea just stalls.
Okay, so practice 1, common knowledge. Attitude 1, trust. The information foundation needs the psychological safety of trust to actually work, especially given the power shift involved. Makes sense. What's the second pair?
The second master practice focuses on aligning individual motivus with the organizational purpose. And this is coupled with the attitude of cooperation.
Motivus. Okay, that's a specific term. Does the source explain what's meant by that beyond just motivation?
It does, yeah. It traces it back to the Latin motivus, which means movement. So motivus is defined as that internal thing, that drive that makes us move towards something we desire. The interesting part, as the source describes it, is that it's always personal, always subjective, and basically invisible to others. It's your inner engine.
So it's not just what makes you tick, but that really deep personal driver.
Exactly. And Dr. Revere uses this concept to challenge some common ideas. Like, the source suggests people aren't really demotivated. What we call demotivation is usually a sign that their internal motivus just isn't connecting anymore with the goal or the purpose the organization expects from them. There's a mismatch.
That's a really different way to look at it. Instead of blaming the person, it asks, where's the disconnect between their drive and our goal?
Right. And it also reframes extrinsic motivation. The source argues it's not quite right to think we give people extrinsic motivation. It's more that their internal motivus might latch on to something external like a bonus, a recognition, or even a deadline that allows that inner drive to push forward in that specific situation. The drive itself remains internal.
That's subtle, but important. So you can't really motivate someone from the outside. You create conditions where their own motivus can hook onto the shared objective.
That's the core idea. So the practice, then, is all about actively working to create that alignment. It means being super clear and transparent about the organization's purpose, its why, and also being clear about how each person's contribution, their individual purpose, you might say, plugs into and helps achieve that bigger purpose.
And I'm guessing this is another area where traditional management often, falls short.
According to the source, definitely. It points out how often that big, inspiring mission statement ends up just being words on a poster that nobody really thinks about day to day. It's not a living thing.
Yeah, I've seen that movie.
And similarly, how the understanding of what someone uniquely brings, which is often discussed when they're hired, kind of gets forgotten once they're in the door and just doing the tasks.
Yeah.
The source actually uses the phrase sinks to the bottom of the sea after a few weeks of collaborating.
So the purpose isn't felt, the personal drive isn't connected, and you get that misalignment you mentioned. Okay, so how do you make this alignment actually happen between people? What's the attitude needed here?
This brings us to the second primary attitude: cooperation.
Cooperation. Okay, sounds straightforward, but I suspect it's more than just playing nice.
Oh, much more. According to the source, it's not just about avoiding fights. It's about actively, constructively working together towards that shared purpose, respecting how everyone's aligned contributions fit together. The source is quite direct. Without a real active spirit of cooperation, self-management just loses its power, its driving force. The alignment is potential energy. Cooperation turns it into action.
Right. So, practice 2, aligning motivus and purpose. Attitude 2, cooperation. We've got the shared info built on trust, and now we have aligned inner drive channeled through cooperation. What's the third piece of this foundation?
The third master practice is the coordination of explicit commitments.
Commitments. The source uses pretty strong language about these, right? Calls them the backbone.
It does. Calls commitments the backbone of the whole system. It basically frames the entire operational side as management by commitments.
Management by commitments.
Okay.
Different from managing tasks or roles.
Very different. The practice is about having a clear way for people to articulate, publish, make visible their specific contributions framed as commitments, and making sure these are clearly linked back to the main organizational purpose.
So instead of my job description saying, do X, Y, Z, I'm saying, I commit to delivering A, B, C to help us achieve our goal.
Yes, exactly. And crucially, the source emphasizes these commitments must be auto-initiated.
Auto-initiated, meaning I define them myself.
You define them, yes, but always in discussion and agreement with whoever else is involved. Depends on that commitment. It's not just you deciding in a vacuum. You initiate, you define, you agree. You're not just assigned work.
And these commitments, they don't just exist in isolation, right? You said coordination.
Absolutely not. That's key. The source stresses they form a dynamic network of commitments. It emerges naturally from how people actually need to work together.
A network. Connecting people through their promises to each other.
Kinda, yeah. Think about it. To fulfill your own commitments, you'll almost certainly need something from someone else. So the source says you'll need to request commitments from others, and they'll need things from you, so you'll receive requests and need to make commitments to help them fulfill theirs. The self-management system has to coordinate this web of give and take.
Okay, so if I commit to launching a new feature, I might need to request a commitment from design for the UI and from ops for the server setup, and maybe marketing is requesting a commitment from me for some technical details for their launch plan.
Perfect example. It's exactly that kind of living mesh of dependencies, all driven by people initiating and requesting what's needed to hit the overall purpose. And the system for coordinating this, Dr. Revere argues, has to be polycentric.
Polycentric, as in many centers, not just one central control point.
Exactly. Coordination doesn't funnel up and down a hierarchy. It happens more naturally, more spontaneously, directly between the people or teams involved, whenever the need arises to fulfill a commitment and push the purpose forward. This polycentric way allows the whole organization to test things, adapt, adjust constantly. It behaves like a living system.
That sounds radically different, much more fluid than the fixed structures we talked about earlier.
It really is, and the source explicitly contrasts this with fixed roles, rigid job descriptions, hierarchies, arguing those things make this kind of spontaneous, adaptive movement impossible, especially now.
Why, especially now? What's changed?
The source points squarely at the operating environment. It uses that VICA acronym, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. Today's world is just incredibly complex, always shifting. A rigid, slow organization, the argument goes, just can't keep up. It can't compete effectively. That ability to coordinate fluidly through commitments is vital for agility.
Okay, I see. So navigating this VICA world, using this polycentric coordination of commitments, it sounds like it demands something specific from the people involved, like a constant state of learning.
You hit it exactly. And that leads us straight to the third primary attitude needed for this practice: continuous learning.
Continuous learning. Yeah, that feels essential for a system that's always adapting and adjusting, especially in a complex world.
It is. The source says this polycentric system doesn't just encourage learning, it actively demands it. People who think they can just learn their job once and for all, or who only want minimal updates. Well, the source says they're just not cut out for this kind of system. The attitude of wanting to constantly learn, adapt, improve is described as absolutely critical.
So you can't just find your niche and coast. The system itself pushes you to keep evolving.
That's the idea. And the source actually notes this is why some people realize self-management isn't for them. Maybe they wanted more predictability, less effort, what the source calls accommodation. Or if they join without that learning mindset, they often get expelled by the system. Not necessarily fired, but they just can't keep up with the dynamic nature, can't contribute effectively, and they drift out.
Wow. So the system itself almost self-selects for people with that continuous learning drive.
It seems to be a necessary component for it to function as intended.
Okay, let's pull this all together then. Chapter 5, according to Dr. Revere, really is about the absolute non-negotiables.
Yes. The three master practices: common knowledge, sharing information wisely; alignment of motivus and purpose, connecting that inner drive to the collective goal; and coordination of explicit commitments, managing the work through this dynamic, self-initiated network.
And each one needs its partner attitude. Trust to make the knowledge sharing and power shift possible. Cooperation to turn that aligned drive into collective results. And continuous learning to navigate the dynamic complexity of the commitment network and the VICA world.
And just to reiterate the source's point, it's all six working together. That's the foundation. You can't really do self-management properly without all of them firing.
And like we said up front, you implement the whole package. Maybe you test that package in a smaller area first, but you need all the ingredients present from the beginning in that test.
That really is the core message of this foundational chapter.
So for you listening, if you're considering moving towards self-management or maybe joining a company that claims to practice it, what's the big takeaway here?
I think it's realizing that self-management isn't just a structural tweak like removing manager titles. It demands really deep shifts in how information flows, how power is held, how people are motivated, how work actually gets coordinated. And if you try to adopt some elements without building these six foundations that trust, cooperation, learning, common knowledge, motivus alignment, and commitment coordination, Dr. Revere's perspective is clear. It just won't hold up. It's like building on sand.
It really underscores how much is about the human side. Those attitudes of trust, cooperation, learning are just as vital as the practices themselves.
Absolutely. And maybe the most useful question this chapter leaves us with is this: thinking about yourself or your organization, which of these foundations feels like the biggest hurdle? Is it building that radical trust, fostering genuine cooperation, cultivating that relentless learning mindset? Knowing where the biggest challenge lies is probably the first step.
That's a really insightful point to consider. Thanks for joining us for this exploration on the Outsider Edge.
And we hope you'll join us next time on The Outsider Edge as we continue unpacking Dr. Revere's book, Self-Management. We'll be looking at a tool designed to help put these ideas into practice: the self-management model, Canvas.